Welcome to Impact the World, a podcast from West Park Baptist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. This is where we discuss topics related to how we can all love God, love people, and impact the world. Here's your host, Tara Hayes.
Welcome to Impact the World. I'm your host, Tara Hayes, and I'm sitting down again with Jake Bishop. Hey,
so good
Jake.
to be here.
Glad you're here. Today we're kicking off a series of episodes, bonus episodes, about spiritual disciplines. These conversations that we're about to have are all born out of a previous episode talking about how we change. Mm-hmm. And that episode came about because of Jake's message that he is going to be bringing about thriving in digital Babylon and the importance of how we change in that kind of a culture and what that looks like. So today, our first spiritual discipline topic is silence and solitude.
Correct. Yeah.
I'm excited about this one.
As an introvert, one of my favorites, right? So for some people, this is the one they try to avoid. I love this one. Like this is the best. So
That's
silence
awesome.
and solitude. Yeah, and so the point of these and kind of this series is just to knock them out in 15 minutes or less so that you can listen to these on your commute and just get an introduction to the practices and then hopefully be able to apply them to your lives. That's the hope. And so we're not going super in depth, but just introducing
want them to be very practical.
Absolutely. That's the goal. Let me start just to kind of convince you why we need this. Other than, as I'll say, Jesus did it. So that should be,
okay.
That should be a good argument. But I think we need this. And let me also just caveat, I'm preaching this at time of recording, I'm preaching on Sunday on Thriving Digital Babylon. I will be talking about silence and solitude. I don't know exactly what I'm going to include, so hopefully this isn't just a total repeat of what I'm going to say then. But Thriving in Digital Babylon, the point being that I'm going to make in my sermon is that we live in a very distracted age, right? It's.
Why do you say that, Jake? I look at my phone?
As we record a podcast that you're listening to.
While you're driving down the road.
So we live in a very distracting age because there are things to distract us. I think I'll probably say this in the sermon on Sunday, but I just think it's so crazy that I got to share it. I found out, this is ridiculous. I found out that in medieval France, one of the ways they tortured people was they would tie ropes to each of their limbs, and then they would tie those ropes to horses, 4 individual horses.
What?
And then they would have the horses run in opposite directions. Crazy, gruesome, gross.
Horrible.
You know what they called it? Distraction.
Oh my goodness.
That was the word they used for it. So it's super, super gross. But isn't that what distraction does to our soul?
Oh,
right?
That is an excellent point.
Like we're just constantly being pulled in so many directions. Right? So many directions. Here's a couple. These are not from what I know Christian writers or anything, but Andrew Sullivan wrote an article back in 2016 about his addiction to his smartphone, and he called it "I used to be a human being." Doesn't that get
wow.
like it feels like we're just being?
We've turned into robots.
Yeah, it's just pulling us in all different directions. We can't focus. Here's his quote. One of his quotes from that article. He said, "Not long ago, surfing the web, however addictive, was a stationary activity. At your desk at work or at home on your laptop, you disappeared down a rabbit hole of links and resurfaced minutes or hours later to re-encounter the world. But the smartphone then went and made the rabbit hole portable, inviting us to get lost in it anywhere, at any time, whatever else we might be doing. Information soon penetrated every waking moment of our lives."
Wow.
That last line is important.
Yeah.
Right? Information soon penetrated every waking moment of our lives. A recent survey I found that 77% of young adults answered yes when asked, "When nothing is occupying my attention, the first thing I do is reach for my phone." And I don't think that's just a young adult problem.
No,
I've seen my 89-year-old grandma do it.
I was going to say, I see a lot of people that are not young adults that are doing the same thing.
Absolutely. And then Cal Newport, who's written a lot of great stuff on how to use our devices wisely, from what I know, not a Christian, but he says that we're the first generation or first group of people to actually suffer from solitude deprivation. Here's how he defines that: a state in which you spend close to zero time alone with your own thoughts and free from inputs of other minds.
Wow.
And so we are, again, being pulled in so many different directions. We're distracted, right? I think I want to make the point on Sunday, think of the Mary and Martha story, right? Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet. Martha is busy working. If that was written today, Jesus says, you're distracted by many things. It could be that she's not working. She's just trying to get that perfect filter on that selfie she took with Jesus and make sure that gets posted at the right time, right? We're so distracted by many things. And so if that's the problem, and I assume that you maybe agree that is a problem, what's the solution? And so I think one is silence and solitude. Silence and solitude. And this is not something made up. This is something that Jesus did himself. And here's how I would define it. And I'm taking this from John Mark Comer. He says, silence and solitude is intentional time in the quiet to be alone with ourselves and with God. Right? Wow. Intentional time in the quiet to be alone with ourselves and with God. And if you look at Jesus' life, he was doing this all of the time.
Right.
I mean, when he's baptized by John, that kind of kicks off his ministry. And the first thing he does is he doesn't go get a crowd together and start preaching. He doesn't start healing. He goes away for 40 days in the silence, alone, right? Spending time with himself and God.
And I think so many times people are like, well, I'm an extrovert and I have to be with lots of people to be charged. But I think you miss that. You need that alone time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Jesus, he didn't stop in his ministry, right? Like over and over again, we're told he gets up early to go just be alone with his Father. At certain points, he goes away and the disciples are looking for him because they don't get why he keeps leaving, right? But this is so essential, right? Because first of all, Jesus modeled it for us. But it's essential because it is one of the most countercultural things that we can do. But... okay, so great. Silence and solitude, be alone in the silence, be alone with God. If you've tried it, that's easier said than done.
Yes.
What's your experience with silence and solitude?
Well, it's funny that you ask because it is, I do have time every day that I have set aside. That's my goal, silence and solitude. And something that I'm sure we're going to talk about in another episode would be like prayer. Going hand in hand with silence and solitude. Mm-hmm. And it is one of the most frustrating times. And I think it's quiet. I should be able to focus without a problem on praying. But it is like my mind is all over the place. And it's almost like the silence is distracting.
Yes.
But I know that's a product not of the Lord, but of culture and everything around. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly right. So, I mean, Jesus goes to be alone with his Father, and who shows up? Satan. Right? Yeah. And so,
exactly.
So silence and solitude, it can be scary, right? Yeah. Because when we're alone, our anxieties, our fears, the future, eternity,
things we're not sure of,
it all comes to the surface. Yeah. Right,
because we're not distracted.
I was watching Parks and Rec the other day, and Andy Dwyer, the great theologian, there's a scene where he's really bored. He says, "I was so bored, I started thinking about eternity. What is this? What are we here for? Oh, it was awful, right?" And there's a sense in which that's what happened. Like we want to keep Netflix on. We want to keep our phones on. We want to keep all that because we're trying to drown out all of those things.
Well, it's funny because I am a little bit older than you. We all know. And back in the day, so to speak, before phones, it was TV or radio. Yeah. And I think, there were a lot of years I was single. And how easy it was to just come home and turn on the TV, even if I wasn't watching it. Or turn on music. And I've heard a lot of people say, I have to have that noise.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think if we train ourselves, once you get used to having some silence, it really it changes your life.
Transformational,
it's very transformational.
Yes, but it will be hard.
It will be hard.
So one theologian calls silence and solitude the furnace of transformation. right? And so, because if you just keep the noise on, you're just not dealing with all that stuff, the war that's raging inside of you.
Right.
It's just that you're not dealing with it, right?
Right.
You're treating the symptoms. You're not treating the actual
Exactly.
problem.
Right.
And so when we actually enter into silence and solitude, all that stuff does come up to the surface. But what it does is we're learning to be with our pain and our angers and our fear, and we're letting God be with us so that the Holy Spirit can start to work on those things.
Yeah.
Right? If we don't, we're just drowning out, and we never have that time to be able to enter into that.
Well, and it's harder to hear the Spirit
Yeah.
speak to you.
Yeah.
If you're always drowning it out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There was this one time when I used to teach Sunday school a long time ago, one of the teachers had this situation where they said, okay, I'm going to talk to you in a whisper, and I'm the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And you can hear me because it's quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And then she started turning on a radio, a TV, and doing all of these things.
That's good.
And she's like, can you still hear the Holy Spirit?
Mm.
You probably can't because you've drowned it out with all these other things.
Yeah. So that'll preach.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And here's the thing. I mean, if you're still not convinced, this is from John Mark Comer in his book, A Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which I talk about all the time. Going to talk about it on Sunday. Amazing book. Check it out. But here's what he says. He says these are the consequences of not entering into silence and solitude. And I think, at least for me, I'm like, yeah. Yeah. Here's what he says. He says, we don't have silence and solitude. We feel distant from God and end up living off of somebody else's spirituality, be it via a podcast feed, or this one's great,
Oops.
right? Or book or one-page devotional we read before we rush out the door for work. We feel distant from ourselves. We lose sight of our identities and callings. We get sucked into the tyranny of the urgent, not the important. We feel an undercurrent of anxiety that rarely, if ever, goes away. This sense that we're always behind, always playing catch up, never done. Then we get exhausted. We wake up and our first thoughts are, already? I can't wait to go to bed. We lag through our days, our low-grade energy on loan from our stimulants of choice. Even when we catch up on our sleep, we feel a deeper kind of tired. Then we turn to our escapes of choice. We run out of energy to do what's actually life-giving for our souls, say prayer, and instead we turn to cheap fixes. Another glass of wine, a new show streaming online, our social media feeds, or even pornography. We become easy prey for the tempter, just furthering our sense of distance from God and our souls. Then emotional health sets in. We start living from the surface of our lives, not the core. We're reactionary. The smallest thing is a trigger. A throwaway line from the boss, a snide comment from a coworker, a suggestion from a spouse or roommate. It doesn't take much. We lose our tempers, bark at our kids, get defensive, sulk, feel angry or sad, often both. These are the signs and symptoms of a life without silence and solitude.
Wow. I mean, you can see that everywhere in our culture.
Absolutely.
And it's not even just our culture. It is within the church.
Yes.
And I look at that and I think, I can see that.
Yeah.
I mean, the days that I don't have that time, I can easily see like my reaction.
Yeah.
I'm not as in control of the Holy Spirit, really. It's not me.
Yeah.
Again, it's the work of the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
I am not giving into his control over my reactions.
That's it. Absolutely.
And so it's like you need that time to hear what he's saying about all of those things.
And there's this line, Screw Tape Letters, so, it's a senior demon writing to a junior demon. And he basically goes on and on about how they want to turn the world into a kingdom of noise. And he says, this is again, Satan has demons. Says, we will make the whole universe a noise in the end, right? They say, keep the person that you're tempting away from silence and solitude.
Wow.
So that's why you need it. How do you do it? Really, really quickly, what does it look like practically? And I'd love for you to speak into this too, because I'm sure you have some things that I won't even mention. But again, our definition is actually pretty simple. Silence and solitude is intentional time in the quiet to be alone with ourselves and with God. Adele Calhoun calls this a container discipline, right? That's the reason we're putting this first, because all the other disciplines and practices, most of them we need to do in silence and solitude.
Right.
Yes, we need to read the Bible. with others. We need to pray with others. We need to do it with others, but we also need times where we do it with ourselves. And so it's setting aside time to be in the quiet with God. Here's just a practical tip that I've found. And just practically what my silence and solitude looks like is different. Sometimes, often it's filled with prayer, filled with Bible reading. Sometimes it's just kind of walking around in the silence and, listening, like more just spending time with God and not even feeling like I have to say anything.
Right.
And also here's another practical tip that I would give. Find your place that you can go to do this, right? You can obviously do it anywhere, but you hear, all these, Christians throughout history talking about their prayer closet.
Right.
I was struck by this line the other day in the book of John. Jesus, obviously we know of Gethsemane, the Garden of Gethsemane, as the place where he's, crying out to his Father and towards the end of his life. But it says in John that Judas knew where to find him because he had gone there so many times with his disciples.
So this wasn't the first time.
Wasn't the first time he was gone there. And so it seems that this was a place, this garden that Jesus felt like was a good place. Like he kind of, in that moment where he knew he needed to be with his Father, he ran to this place.
He took comfort there. He went to this place and get the Garden of Gethsemane. And so I have that place. I'm not going to say because I don't want you to steal my place, but I have a park that I try to get to as much as I can, where it just feels like the Celtic Christians used to talk about a thin space, where it just felt like, God is always near us, but it just felt like God was really near. And that's that place for me. And so that's a big tip I have. It's just it's not actually hard to do. It's just finding the time to actually do it. Do you have anything to add? It's for me, you can't take my place because it's in my office at home, which sounds so not exciting, but it is a place where I've made it my own. It's my little desk. I have a nice view out my window. I have all my Bible study stuff there. And it is just a place where I have continually made it a habit to go. And it is a place where I really I feel comfort there. Last year I had foot surgery and I couldn't walk for like 3 months. And so I literally worked from my bed for a long time, and it made me crazy that I could not go to the office and sit at my desk.
Yeah, that's good.
So it's become that place, and it's a certain I've chosen a certain time of day, and we could jump into, does it have to be in the morning? Does it have to be, because and that may prolong this conversation, but that's just when I've chosen to do it, when I get up and have that time, because I feel like it helps anchor my day. Yeah,
absolutely. No, that's great. It's a good word. And I'll say this. So just let me kind of close it up with this. First of all, a story. Okay, it may feel like you cannot do this, right? Like, my life is so hectic, right? Fight for it.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, Jesus fought for it. You can too.
Yes.
Okay, he fought for it. You can too. Here's another example. Susanna Wesley, mother to John and Charles, two of the most important figures in Christian history. She had 11 children.
No.
And she was an amazing mom, but she had this thing that she would do where she would, throughout the day at certain times, put her apron over her head. And when she did this, the kids were trained to know, don't bother mommy, she's spending time with God right now. Okay? And so her life was hectic. It was crazy. And you need to take that into account, right? Like, it's just going to be different when you have kids.
And again,
small
seasons.
Kids. Seasons
kind of goes
different.
back to what we talked about in
But
seasons.
fight for it in the season you're in. Put the apron over your head. Okay, turn off the podcast, as I say on a podcast. Turn off the podcast and spend that time in the car.
Right.
The shower could be a great thing. Right? It's just finding time to work it in. And here's a practical just challenge for you. Find 10 more minutes than you have right now.
Right.
So maybe it's 10 minutes total, or maybe it's, adding 10 minutes to what you have right now, but just find that in the day and devote that to being alone, just you and God, intentionally in the silence.
Yeah, I like that, to fight for it. Make it a priority. You have to, get ready every day. You have to eat. You have to sleep. You have to have that time as a priority. Well, I think that's a great introduction to silence and solitude, and I enjoyed the time, and we will be back again on another episode with another spiritual discipline. Thanks for joining us today. It's been great having you, Jake.
Thank you for listening to Impact the World. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook. Just look for the profile West Park Baptist.